Every optic on a U.S. service rifle exists today because something has failed before. And fighting doctrine also changes over time, and that demanded newer capabilities. But here's what they don't tell you. Fixing those failures cost American taxpayers over $4 billion. And right now, the Army just signed a $2.7 billion contract for a single optic system. That's more than some countries spend on their entire military budget. The question is, was any of it worth it? Through decades of non-stop incremental upgrades and hundreds of millions dumped into procurement programs, rifle optics can finally work reliably and hold zero during sustained combat operations. But rewind the clock a few decades, and the military brass wouldn't even consider mounting glass on standard infantry rifles. That was sniper territory only. Then Vietnam happened, and everything shifted. And once you see the pattern, you'll realize this entire story isn't really about optics. It's about how the U.S. military learns, slowly, painfully, and only after it burns money and makes mistakes. All right, so let's go back to 1970. A Green Beret officer named Major Dick Meadows was deep in planning mode for the Son-Tay raid, a high-risk prisoner rescue operation. During prep, he stumbled across this obscure piece of gear called the single-point occluded eye gunsight. Think of it as the grandfather of modern red dot optics. The concept was simple but revolutionary. You could aim with both eyes open instead of squinting through iron sights. Meadows didn't wait for official approval. He went out and bought 50 of these experimental sights with his own funds, $50 each. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $300 per unit in today's currency. His team ran live fire drills in low-light scenarios, and the results were eye-opening. Even the least skilled shooters on the team could consistently group all their rounds inside a 12-inch circle at 25 meters under minimal illumination. This was unheard of accuracy for the era. The technology worked by superimposing a red aiming point directly onto the target plane. No need to align front post with rear notch. The shooter just focused on the threat, and the dot told them exactly where the bullet would impact. This gave soldiers dramatically better situational awareness because both eyes stayed open. Target transitions became faster. Just look at the next threat, and the dot followed instantly. But here's where institutional inertia kicked in. Meadows presented these test results to Army leadership, and their response was essentially, thanks, but no thanks. The brass looked at hard data proving improved accuracy under combat conditions, and still rejected the concept entirely. Meanwhile, the geopolitical situation was deteriorating rapidly. This was peak Cold War tension. President John F. Kennedy had just been assassinated. Defense budgets were stretched thin across multiple priorities, and decision-makers simply didn't see individual soldier equipment as worth the investment. The institutional mindset at the time viewed optics as fragile commercial gear that couldn't survive field use. The technology honestly wasn't mature enough to change their minds. So the single-point sight vanished from military consideration for decades. Nobody talked about it. The concept just died. This was the first attempt. It failed because timing and institutional readiness didn't align. Every time the Army tried to solve optics, they fixed one problem and accidentally created the next one. That loop is why we're here. Now jump ahead to 1997. Technology had finally caught up, and more importantly, combat doctrine had evolved. The Army made a decision that would reshape infantry warfare. Every soldier needed an optic on every rifle. No exceptions. This marked the beginning of the M68 close combat optic era, and it came with a massive price tag. The Army selected Aimpoint's Comp M series as their standard issue red dot. The initial purchase was 100,000 Comp M XD sights. Then, around the year 2000, they upgraded to the Comp M2 model and ordered another 280,000 units. This wasn't a small trial program anymore. This was full-scale adoption across the force. The operational impact was substantial. Soldiers could now maintain focus on the target with both eyes open instead of the old iron sight alignment technique. The red dot system enabled effective target engagement out to 300 meters, and it was significantly faster than traditional sighting methods. One instructor described it as switching marksmanship from hard mode to easy mode. The only point you need to understand is this: if an optic can't stay zeroed under stress, the entire program becomes a waste of money. On paper, this looked like the perfect solution, except the M68 quickly revealed the ugly reality. The optic worked, but it created a logistics and reliability headache that nobody budgeted for. Except the early M68 optics had serious problems that burned through the budget in unexpected ways. Battery life was abysmal. Aimpoint's marketing claimed extended runtime, but field reality was closer to 1,000 hours of continuous use. And here's the kicker: troops had to max out the brightness setting in daylight conditions, which drained batteries even faster, so units were constantly burning through batteries in combat zones. This was a legitimate operational issue that the procurement office hadn't fully anticipated. Unlike today's optics that can run for 4 to 5 years on a single battery and just stay powered on indefinitely, these early models required constant maintenance. More on that later, because this becomes a recurring theme. There was another critical flaw. The mounting system kept loosening under field use. It got so bad that soldiers were jury-rigging their optics to their rifles, using wire and paracord just to prevent them from falling off during patrols. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of military-grade durability. And of course, early-generation optics couldn't hold zero the way modern products can. Drop one on a hard surface or bang it against a vehicle, and you'd lose your sight alignment. Aimpoint eventually fixed these mounting and durability issues with the Comp M4 model in 2007. The Army placed an initial order for 163,000 units. Eventually, total procurement reached 339,000 optics. This version used a standard AA battery with an advertised 8-year continuous runtime. You could literally turn it on and forget about it for nearly a decade. No more battery anxiety in the field. Then came the Comp M4S variant in 2009. The Army awarded a contract ceiling of up to 565,000 units for this improved model. A competitor company tried to challenge this contract in federal court, claiming the selection process was unfair. Their optic failed the mandatory 6,000-round durability test. It failed twice. Despite the legal challenge, a federal judge allowed the Army to proceed with Aimpoint. Final procurement under that contract ended up at 265,000 units. By 2010, the Army had purchased its 1 millionth M68 optic. About 85% of all Army M4 carbines now had a red dot mounted. This was institutional transformation at scale. Let's talk about money. One contract in 2007 for just the 3x magnifier accessory, not even the optic itself, cost $9.88 million. The 2009 contract for 565,000 units carried a potential value between $200 and $300 million if fully executed. Earlier procurement batches probably totaled several hundred million more. Total spending on M68 optics across all variants came to roughly $500 million. Here's the critical question: was it worth every penny? Soldiers deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan overwhelmingly preferred the red dot over iron sights. It was faster, more reliable, and more intuitive than anything previously issued. From a cost-benefit analysis standpoint, this program actually worked. And that success created the next problem. Once soldiers saw how much better optics made them, they stopped accepting limitations. They wanted more capability. and the Marines were the first to demand it. But while the Army was issuing red dots across the force, the Marine Corps identified a different problem. They wanted magnification. The tactical requirement was target identification and engagement at extended ranges beyond what a 1x red dot could provide. In 2004, the Marines adopted the Advanced Combat Optical Gunsight, known by the acronym ACOG, as their Rifle Combat Optic, abbreviated RCO. General James Mattis, who later became Secretary of Defense, stated that the 4X ACOG represented the biggest improvement in Marine infantry lethality since the introduction of the M1 Garand rifle in World War II. That's a bold claim from a highly respected officer. The initial contract was $7.5 million. Then, in 2005, the Marines awarded Trijicon a massive $660 million contract for up to 800,000 ACOGs over 5 years. The first order alone was 104,000 units at approximately $610 per scope. That single purchase cost U.S. taxpayers $63.4 million right there. The ACOG scope uses battery-free illumination, which solved the power consumption issues that plagued earlier optics. It relies on fiber optics during daylight and tritium for low light conditions. The 4-power magnification extended effective engagement range to 800 meters. It came equipped with a TA-31 bullet drop compensator reticle that made range estimation significantly easier. Essentially, this is a fixed magnification prism sight, not a traditional variable scope. Marines reported a 65% improvement in qualification scores after switching from iron sights to the ACOG. Hit probability at range went through the roof. These weren't subjective opinions. These were measurable performance metrics. The Army saw these results and wanted in on the program. In 2007, they ordered up to 135,000 ACOGs under the military designation M150 RCO. That represented probably another $100 million or more in procurement costs. By the late 2000s, both Army and Marine infantry units had magnified prism optics as standard issue. From a procurement standpoint, the ACOG program was a success story. No major drama or controversy compared to some of the rifle replacement programs we've covered on this channel. And of course, designing an entirely new weapon system is exponentially more complex than manufacturing an optic. So this isn't a perfect comparison. But it worked. The Marines are still using these ACOGs today. In 2020, they awarded a $41 million contract to refurbish legacy ACOGs, then another $20.7 million in 2023 for continuous repairs extending through the year 2030. Combined spending on Trijicon ACOGs across all contracts was several $100 million. This solved one problem, but created another. While prism sights were being adopted across the force, the military was simultaneously investing in another technology similar to the Aimpoint Red Dot. In the mid-1990s, a company based in Michigan invented a holographic sight for firearms. Think of it like a red dot, but with a fundamentally different reticle projection method. The company was called EOTech, and by 1996, they had manufactured the world's first holographic weapon sight. Long story short, it functions like a red dot for the end user, but projects the reticle using a laser diode instead of an LED emitter. This means battery drain is significantly faster than typical red dot sights. Keep that detail in mind. It matters later. After 9/11, U.S. Special Operations Forces started purchasing EOTech sights with their unit discretionary funds. At that time, the cost was approximately $300 per unit. Between 2002 and 2004, Special Operations teams bought around 5,500 of these sights because performance in the field was superior to existing issued optics. By 2004, regular Army and Marine units deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan were also receiving these sites through various procurement channels. That same year, Special Operations Command placed a massive order: 67,000 holographic sites for $16.6 million. This was the first official military program to procure them in bulk quantities. The site received the official military designation SU-231PEQ and became standard equipment for Special Operations Forces. But there was a problem brewing beneath the surface. In 2015, the government discovered that EOTech had been concealing critical defects in their sights since 2006. The issue involved losing zero under extreme temperature conditions. Basically, the sight would experience a 6 to 12 MOA shift in point of impact, what engineers called thermal drift. There were also moisture intrusion problems, so the sight could fog internally and the reticle would fade or completely disappear in humid environments. EOTech knew about these defects. They knew soldiers' lives depended on these sights functioning correctly under all environmental conditions. And they kept selling the sights to the military anyway, claiming in marketing materials and contract bids that the optics performed flawlessly in all conditions. This was fraud, plain and simple. The Department of Justice sued EOTech's parent company, L3 Communications. In late 2015, the company paid $25.6 million to settle the lawsuit. This was a black eye for the defense industry. It demonstrated that even trusted manufacturers could hide critical defects if protecting sales and profit margins took priority over soldier safety. Think about that. Soldiers were taking fire, returning fire, and trusting their sights to function correctly, and the manufacturer knew the product had significant flaws the entire time. So did the military stop using EOTechs entirely? Actually, no. Even with all the problems and the fraud settlement, the military didn't completely abandon holographic sights. EOTech fixed the thermal drift and moisture issues in their newer models. In 2018, Special Operations Command gave them a new contract worth $26.3 million for improved sights, essentially telling them to clean up their mess and prove the technology could work as advertised. The improved EOTech models, like the EXPS-3, have since been adopted and work well according to field reports. But this entire episode proved something important. Reliability matters more than fancy features, and companies need to be held accountable when they lie about product performance. While that scandal was unfolding, by the late 2010s, the military started asking a new question. Could one optic replace both the Red Dot and the ACOG? Could they consolidate the logistics chain and give every soldier a single optic that worked at close range and distance? This is when optical technology finally caught up with tactical requirements. Low-power variable optics became viable in the commercial firearm industry. These are called LPVOs in the tactical community. These optics could offer true 1x magnification like a reflex sight for close quarters, then zoom up to 6 or 8 power for precision shooting at distance. The Marine Corps started with the Squad Common Optic Program. In 2020, they awarded Trijicon a contract worth up to $64 million for the VCOG 1-8 by 28 mm variable scope. This optic can dial from true 1x for close quarters combat up to 8 power for target identification at range. Squad Common Optics started fielding in 2021. Marines loved the flexibility of being able to zoom in or out depending on mission parameters and engagement distances. The Army followed with the Direct View Optic Program, also known as the DVO program. It's also named the Squad Variable Powered Scope. You may have heard others call it the SVPS. The purpose is to provide a single variable power optic that can range from 1x to 6x power, and they're supposed to replace a mix of 4-power ACOGs and some Aimpoints across infantry units. But let's not forget that this isn't exactly revolutionary new territory for the Army. The Special Operations SOTMOD program had the LCAN Spectre DR years before, which let the operator instantly switch from 1x to 4x without turning any dial. Just flip a lever. But that was mostly seen with Special Forces units, not regular infantry. The LCAN Optic is now considered outdated with a mounting system that doesn't meet today's standardization requirements. In 2020, the Army awarded a $77 million production contract to Sig Sauer for the Tango 6 T1 to 6 power by 24mm scope. Now, this is the precursor to the next generation squad weapon program, because the U.S. Army realized it couldn't wait for the NGSW program to mature before adopting variable optics for existing M4 rifles. At that time, the NGSW fire control system was very unique technology, but it was also very expensive and limited in availability. The Army still has hundreds of thousands of M4s that will remain in service for decades to come, so they spent extra money for the Direct View Optic program and picked the Tango 6T as a fast upgrade to current infantry units. Meanwhile, they were waiting for the NGSW fire control, designated XM157, to develop and mature alongside the XM7 rifle and XM250 automatic rifle. The DVO contract covers up to approximately 120,000 optics over 5 years. Combined cost between both programs, the Marine Corps Squad Common Optic and the Army Direct View Optic, was about $141 million, $64 million for the Marines, $77 million for the Army. These are modest costs compared to earlier programs, partly because of lower initial quantities, but if they prove successful in the field, expect significantly larger follow-on orders. But this isn't even the biggest spending yet. It's not even close. We need to talk about the XM157 scope. The Army calls it the Next Generation Squad Weapon Fire Control, and it nearly cost $2.7 billion to develop and procure. This is where the story gets interesting from a budgetary perspective. In January 2022, the Army awarded Vortex Optics a $2.7 billion contract to manufacture the XM157 NGSW fire control system. This is an advanced 1 to 8x digital combat optic that can range targets using laser technology and automatically calculate holdover for the newly developed XM7 rifle and XM250 automatic rifle, firing the new 6.8mm caliber round. The contract covers up to 250,000 units over 10 years. That breaks down to approximately $10,800 per optic. When you compare that to a $600 ACOG or a $300 M68, the XM157 is significantly more expensive, by an order of magnitude. It's essentially a computer integrated into a rifle scope. It includes a laser rangefinder, ballistic calculator, atmospheric sensors, compass, infrared and visible aiming lasers, digital display overlay, etched reticle backup, network capability with the Army's Integrated Visual Augmentation System goggles, and the list continues. In practical field use, a soldier can laze a target to get exact range to within 1 meter, have the optic automatically adjust for bullet drop and wind drift, see a projected aiming point overlaid on the target, and even share targeting data with other systems in the squad network. The underlying doctrine is to enable infantry units to engage targets at significantly longer ranges and defeat Level 4 body armor systems that standard 5.56 ammunition can't penetrate effectively. But the optic still has numerous areas that need improvement based on early fielding reports. Soldiers have reported optics failing in the field, They call it the red screen of death when the system crashes. The engineering challenge is that packing so many sensors and electronics into a field-worthy optic that can survive combat conditions means high unit cost and complex integration. The system weighs roughly 2 pounds, which is substantial for a rifle-mounted accessory, and the reliance on battery power makes some people worry about long-term durability. Why the concern? Well, young enlisted soldiers break equipment. That's just reality. And this is the most complex electronic device ever mounted on a standard infantry rifle in military history. Back in 2021, during the selection process, Vortex beat out L3 Harris Technologies in the competition. There was no public protest from L3 after the award decision, suggesting the evaluation was clear-cut, and Vortex demonstrated superior performance in testing. So, the total development and procurement ceiling is $2.7 billion. That contract ceiling seems astronomical compared to previous optics programs. But the Army is effectively purchasing fire control computers with the strategic goal of total digitalized battlefield integration, not just simple magnified sights. So, what did taxpayers actually pay across all these programs? And will this increase combat effectiveness in future conflicts? Let's add it up comprehensively. Total spending across all rifle optics programs since the 1990s exceeds $4 billion. That includes M68 Red Dots, ACOGs, EOTechs, variable optics, and the XM157 fire control system. It's not all wasteful spending compared to other weapon programs the Department of Defense has invested in over the years that ended up never being fielded or operationally deployed. But the real lessons here extend beyond just the dollar figures. The military takes an incredibly long time to adopt proven technology. Institutional inertia is a genuine obstacle, but the drive toward innovation is definitely there when competition forces manufacturers to develop better solutions. Companies push to create superior products whenever there's competitive pressure to give warfighters the best possible tools to accomplish their mission. It wasn't always a smooth process. Like any complex engineering endeavor, there were setbacks and failures. But each design generation took incremental improvements that compounded over time. And the Army didn't just buy optics and call it mission complete. They listened to troops complaining about loose mounting systems, dead batteries, and limited magnification capabilities. Then, they fixed those problems in subsequent contracts and procurement cycles. This iterative approach meant each program learned from the previous one's shortcomings. The single-point sight failed in the 1970s because the technology wasn't ready, and institutional support didn't exist. The M68 succeeded because both technology and doctrine aligned. The ACOG filled a capability gap the Red Dot couldn't address. The EOTech scandal taught everyone that accountability matters. And the XM157 represents a bet on digital integration as the future of infantry combat. Whether that $2.7 billion gamble pays off remains to be seen. Initial fielding reports are mixed. The technology is impressive, but complexity introduces new vulnerabilities. Battery dependence, electronic failure modes, and maintenance requirements in austere environments are all legitimate concerns. The pattern across all these programs is clear. The military eventually gets there, but the path is expensive, slow, and sometimes painful. $4 billion spent on rifle optics over 3 decades. Some of it was wasted, some of it saved lives. And the newest system might be the most expensive bet the Army has ever made on individual soldier equipment.